Sir William Seal.
For this opportunity. When this bill first came to the House, sir, I raised some concerns, and the concerns emanate from the stated purpose of this bill. And the stated purpose of this bill, and I'll read it as follows, would amend the Building Act 2004, repeal the Fencing of Swimming Pools Act 1987, but here's what I want to emphasize: to reduce the compliance burden currently imposed on pool owners and territorial authorities in relation to residential pools while maintaining child safety. I stated then, sir, that those were conflicting purposes: to reduce compliance of pool owners and still maintain child safety. And it still concerns me, and I'm pleased that my colleagues have said that our support for this bill is contingent on the government supporting Labour's supplementary order in the name of Jacinda Ardern. And the reason being, sir, is that right throughout the bill, and I'm glad to see that the Select Committee have made some significant changes, we were told from the outset in the regulatory impact statement this bill would save more lives. But I know that my colleagues would have heard from the submitters evidence from their experience that would have challenged that regulatory impact statement by the government. And in fact, the New Zealand Society of Paediatricians stated that the only thing that will improve the current rate of drownings in pools in New Zealand is improved compliance. So it's more compliance rather than less. And yet, you know, throughout the bill, it's riddled with the emphasis of reducing compliance or the burden on pool owners. So I want to come to what my colleague Meka Whaitiri have raised earlier, and that is clause 6A, 6B, and 6C, which gives specific responsibilities around pool safety to the Chief Executive, the Building Consent Authority, and the Territorial Authority. The question I ask is, are we now making the Territorial Authority and Chief Executive responsible for any mishaps that occur? And if so, great. But the responsibility must also fall squarely on the pool owner, you see, because once upon a time I was on Manukau City Council, the greatest council of all of New Zealand, 3 terms. And, well, this government abolished it. And the officials that dealt with swimming pools during my time were emphasized that this bill was so stringent that it was really about the saving of lives of children. In fact, I asked an official one time, you know, what sort of depth would a child drown? And I'd never forget it, because he says a child could drown in a puddle of water outside. And I imagine that would be a baby, if unattended, a child could easily fall face. And he says he said it didn't need to be very deep, but a child could drown. And so I still have concern, and I'm really glad that we're saying that we will support this if the government supports Jacinda Ardern's supplementary order paper, because we're trying to install more safety in this. But the original purpose by the government was not about child safety, but about removing some of the burden on pool owners. And I see that the Select Committee did work and did try to make some changes in the legislation. And one of the things that I'm glad that they have managed to convince the government members to change is the inspection regime from 5 years to 3 years. Because Auckland Council would have submitted and have said that if you leave it for too long, they have practical evidence that actually enables owners to allow their pools and the safety of those pools to deteriorate. In fact, Auckland Council maintained that the regime should continue with 3 yearly inspections, as 65% of pools are found to be uncompliant when, Mr. Chairman,
Sir William Steele.
are found to be uncompliant when inspected within this time frame. So whilst the Select Committee have made some amendments which are taking us back to the original legislation in terms of stringency around the protection of lives of children, it just seems to me, what did we do this in the first place? What was it? If we were saving lives already under the old legislation, what is it that we're now trying to do? To provide more opportunities for young people to drown, children to drown? I just don't get it. I don't get it, and I'm not quite sure what the government's intentions were, other than what the stated purpose was, to remove the burden of pool owners. And I've heard some pool owners say, look, it's their pool, so why should local government interfere? But then that begs the question, what if a child does drown in there? Who do we hold responsible? The fine is $5,000. Is that the cost of, what does that mean? Is that the value that we place on a child's life? I know that that's not the case, but I'm trying to say to this House and to this government who's brought this bill through, what is it that we're trying to do here? If we've saved lives with the old legislation, what on earth are we trying to do with the new legislation? Particularly with the stated aim and the fact that the Select Committee have had to push to make further changes, but we still haven't got it. And that's the reason why we're saying that we would support this, provided that the government supports the supplementary order paper that will be discussed later on.
Which is in the following part.
That's right, and that's what I've said in the following. And therefore, I haven't made any mention of the contents of that supplementary order paper, other than to make reference that whilst there have been some good changes here, it isn't a complete bill. It doesn't give me confidence at all, and certainly from those organisations that are working to promote safety in waters, I don't think that they are confident with this particular bill, and despite the changes that the Select Committee have attempted to make to improve the legislation, I don't think that we're confident enough, sir, to go unless the government tells us, and we'll debate that supplementary order paper in the next while. I want to also then turn, sir, to I can't see the section, but there's a section there where the Chief Executive Officer decides who is the pool maintenance person, or who is the pool person that inspects the pools. I sort of feel like, okay, well, hopefully that means that the Chief Executive of the Government Department we're now giving him some sense of authority, that by appointing the pool inspector, that the public will have confidence that it is a legitimate specialist person with the skills, person who is professional in that duty. But then again, sir, what about the pool owner? Do we hold the pool owner responsible to ensure that that the work is carried out proficiently, carried out safely, and that at the end of the day, there is safety for the children in that household? And sir, I simply say that while the Select Committee have made some good changes to move this bill towards making sure that there's safety for all children, that begs the question, well, why are we then repealing the old legislation? Because that's what it ought to be, is really improving the old legislation and not repealing the old legislation. And so I maintain, sir, that there isn't sufficient safety clauses to give people the confidence that young people, children, are going to be protected, particularly if there are pools in the household that they live in. And so without the the support of this government on the supplementary order paper in the name of Jacinda Ardern, which I won't discuss the content until we come to the next part. We won't be supporting this bill.